Hello and welcome back to my studio. This demonstration, I'm taking a big scene and trying to capture that in a small format painting. So the theme is kind of about contrasts. How to take a huge and expansive scene and get the essentials in a smaller format. I've shown similar sort of things in the past, but this one has a little bit more. A very dramatic scene, a giant mountain in the background. Imagine having that as your backyard. And then this really quaint house, built in a sort of a Cape vernacular style that we have in the Western Cape in South Africa. And also the contrast between the vastness of the scene and the little signs of life, somebody pottering around in the garden. Those sort of little snippets of real life appeal to me as well, and I try to bring a little touch of that into a painting. I mean, we're all these little creatures in a gigantic natural environment, so I find that is also an appealing contrast in the landscape format. There are contrasts as well in the lights and darks, warms and cools. If you've watched my videos before, you'll be familiar with those themes where I try to contrast those elements, and that creates a lot of visual interest in a scene, and that's so important and a big foundation to all of my teaching. So sit back and enjoy this quick demonstration. I try to paint this also in a fairly quick alla prima style, once off, wet over wet. I'm using oil paints and they're ideal for this sort of approach as well, but acrylics and gouache are also great, so use them if that's your preferred medium. And then when the demonstration is done, let me know in the comments or as I'm painting it, and whether you're going to try something out in your own landscape painting. Remember also, I've always have on offer a free painting course, so if you haven't signed up for that in the past, you can find that in the description below, and I think there should be a link up in the top of the video as well. It'd be great if you would join me on my painting school and try out a few things there. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into the painting. Let's have a look at the reference again. The few elements I'm looking at, like the warm and cool color of the building, the lights and darks in the vegetation, and the contrast between the house and the mountain behind. Now the palette I'm using is my standard palette of oils, but I've added vermilion just to try something new, and I'm going to use some of that right now to start toning the paper I'm painting on. I'm using Archer's oil painting paper, and I'm just going to tone this in sort of general sections. The reddish tone in the foreground where the greenery is going, bit of yellow ochre in the middle distance where the mountain is, and then a sort of a cooler neutral. I'll bring in some cerulean blue and just cool down that distant part where the mountain is going to go. And this tone is a way of getting rid of the white canvas, if that's going to help you. And using a tissue, I sort of isolate where I'm going to put a few important shapes. This also helps me remove any wet medium on the surface. I use a little bit of white spirits or the zested medium. And now I have made a start, and then I go in and put in the horizon line, using a bit of ultramarine blue to just draw in a composition. Now, sometimes I'll go in straight with the dark shapes, but there's quite a lot of things in this composition, architectural shapes, and the natural foliage and trees and things like that. So using that one large conifer, I'm using that as a reference point where I'm going to put the building. I'll keep the building as simple as possible. It really is a very simple shape, basically a triangle and rectangle shapes. But plot your way around. I'm using a bristle brush. This is actually a number 4 long flat. Such a small paper, it's quite nice to use that. Take care of perspective, more or less vanishing point on the horizon, so that wall is heading in the correct direction, and it just looks more or less correct. And I think that's all you can really hope for. If it looks a bit wrong, usually it's just a perspective issue where the building lines are not receding to a vanishing point on the horizon. So if you get that horizon in early, you can relate all your shapes to it, and things will look pretty much correctly spaced and settled on your composition. This tree is obviously a nice vertical element. It takes up quite a lot of the painting. We'll work on that as we go, and now getting in those dark shapes with the composition in, get the darks, mass shapes set out. There aren't too many darks in this composition, but are important, especially those behind the house. So it's going to make that light color of the house stand out, or the light value. The few dark trees in the sort of foreground there and around the big tree. And then secondary dark elements, the shadows, that always adds so much to a landscape. Now the shadows up in the mountains are much cooler and not as dark as in the foreground because of perspective. So I'll use cerulean blue, and I'll bring in a bit of white later on. Starting out without any white paint though, I'm just getting colors in and getting a relationship between shapes set out in the composition. So these lights in the foreground, they will change as I bring in white paint for the light areas. But it's much better when you go over some transparent color. It just keeps things from getting too cold from the white paint, and so get color down first. That's the rule. In fact, that applies to any medium, even watercolor. You want to bring in the color first and then the values. So we've got a composition building up. Now we'll see how these dark elements set everything up for the lights. Mostly ultramarine in the darks and maybe a bit of burnt sienna. So I'm noticing some autumn colors. This scene is from, I'd say, is in the early spring in our area. So there's still some autumn colors hanging around. I will just accentuate that with those reds. Mixing a cool white, which is really just a sort of blue-violet, a very light blue-violet for the shadow side of the building. Why do I use a light blue-violet like this? Because it's going to make the lights stand out, and the lights contain a lot of yellow, and yellow is the complement of violet or purple. So all of these little color relationships, I'm thinking about them all the time. So I don't look at the building shapes like an architect. I'm looking at the building shapes purely as an arrangement of shapes that are going to be pleasing in a painting. Once I've got these down, I will then go into the lights. It's a bit of lemon yellow with titanium white, and that's going to start bringing in the sunny light colors. As far as details are concerned, I go for the absolute minimum. The more details you can suggest, the better. You don't have to explain everything in too much detail. I've added a little bit of red with the lemon yellow, and that just adds a little bit more warmth. And these light areas will be thicker paint, so where it's light you can add thicker paint and that'll stand out more. Now I'm just seeing where the lights are going to go on the side of the property here, on the side of the road. That's looking nice and light, but still a bit cool, so more yellow will have to come into those sunny grass areas. A few soft shadows on the wall. And a few lights on the building, just a few, but they work very well. Just catching a few elements. So burnt sienna in sunlight, I'll add a little touch of yellow to it, not just white paint. Always warm up your white paint if you can, if it's going to be in the sunlight. Add something warm to it, because titanium white is a very cool color. Slightly darker violet in the foreground. Some shadows in between. When you put shadows across the road, try and vary the width of the shadows so they don't look too staccato. And the cool greens. Now all these little details on the side of the building that I'm working in at the moment, try to simplify all of them into shapes. If you're not sure, just close your eyes halfway and look for a shape. Look for a vertical shape, horizontal, and the geometric shape. Is it a rectangle? Is it a triangle? Is it a circle? That's what you want to put down. You don't want to put down leaves and twigs. Put down that geometric shape and make sure you can then refine it to show the direction of the light. And that's mostly what you need. So I'll keep adding layers to the lights, trying to break up the shapes a little. Make sure no shape is too regimented. Even the architectural shapes are a little distorted. Not too much, but just a touch of character can make a big difference. Well, obviously the foliage and grass and things like that, you don't want looking too geometric. So put the first main shape down and then adjust it, cut into it to break it up a little. Now the greens on the mountain are quite substantially desaturated. There's the atmospheric effect, so they get cooler and lighter. Much different compared to foreground. Once I'm finished with this, ochre, white, touch of cerulean blue to cool it down. Very nice sort of shape in those rolling hills on the mountain. That can add a sort of a peaceful organic element as well to the painting. Obviously, fitting all of that into a small format like this can be a challenge when you're painting loose. I'm using a relatively large brush here as well. So you just try and suggest. Hopefully it communicates itself correctly to the viewer. Ultimately, though, the success of the painting for me is whether it communicates the light. And if the viewer is captured and interested and motivated to look at the painting because of the light, then it's a success. Just getting a stronger dark, that suggestion of roof at the back and these darks over here. So brought in some burnt sienna with ultramarine to get that strong dark. And these just help to show off the building. Now I have a little bit of white paint or light color on my brush as well, so I will have to re-establish some of these darks. I tend to lose them as the painting goes on, and near the end of the painting I will come back in and re-establish some of the main dark shapes. That's a common problem as brushstrokes overlap, etc. What's different about the painterly approach is you work your way from large to small, constantly adjusting shapes. As long as you get your value structure correct, you can find your way to the resolved painting. I think photoreal or hyperreal approach, you start off with an intricate drawing and you more or less coloring it in and then gradating a few of the edges and adjusting edges. But this approach to painting is you're painting shapes and you're not filling in a drawing. Let's get some lights on the road. Just drag the brush across, get a bit of broken brush strokes as well. So the shadows in the mountains, all I'm thinking is it's a cool color. It's relatively dark, so I'm choosing to use cerulean blue, a touch of alizarin crimson, and I've just got to cool those colors down. So yeah, I've got a few light blues. They are pretty colors. They're not necessarily visible in the mountain, of course, but they serve the function. And that's it. These vital shades, these vital colors add so much interest to the painting. It's the expressive part of it. As long as I'm on the right track with values, I can use whatever. Using a sort of grayish white up at the top of the mountain and then blending it into a lighter cloud color. It's more like mist on top of the mountains there. Just suggesting it all with soft edges and a bit of mixing wet into wet. And that'll have to take care of it. I'm still going to do the tree and there'll be a lot of overlapping there as well. So we got some really nice oranges and yellows, and I'm bringing some reds as well. Yeah, not overly saturated, they are somewhat desaturated. So everything is looking like it's part of the same family of colors, which of course it is, because I'm mixing everything from the colors on my palette. They're not various tube colors, they're mixed from primaries and a few earth colors. So whatever I do mix and put on the painting is going to look in a natural harmony with the entire palette. Try and put colors around the canvas, so I'll bring a few reds and orange colors, but not as strong, and put them in other parts of the painting, maybe in the road or the side of the road or on another tree. Just observing this conifer a little closely, the branches are pointing upwards. They don't hang downwards so much. So I have a few upward branches to sort of at least look like they are from that subject. And of course the conifers don't look like Christmas trees. They are a lot more erratic in shape. Now re-establishing some of those darks I was talking about earlier. Just spreading those autumn colors around a little, making sure there is a harmony of those colors. And then I will get into the tree, at least try and paint it. Getting the main sort of shape, that's all you really need. Be inspired by the subject, but don't feel you have to paint every branch or tree accurately. I'm just trying to get a sort of a loose and organic shape. The tree looks fairly grey actually. It's a lot of it, the tree's in shadow. But I don't think a cold grey tree is going to help the scene. I'm going to I'll bring in a variety of colors for the thinner branches, some violet, some warm colors, a few reddish colors as well. So there is room for a little bit of expressive color. This is the number 4 brush. I could easily be using a rigger brush just to drag a few small shapes in, but my rigger brush unfortunately is in a poor state, and I might have to use it a bit later for adding a figure or something like that. So right now I'm just relying on light strokes with the number 4 long flat. But I keep in mind, if I put a shape down or a line that is too big, I can cut in with the background colors and make it smaller or thinner, and that normally ends up being a much interesting shape. So you'll see I'll be doing quite a lot of cutting in to adjust the shape of these branches. Changing some of the colors of the branches is always a good idea. It makes the tree more interesting. It also creates the impression of light and shadow in the tree. Now I know that branch on the left is too thick, but as I said earlier, I will cut in and adjust that. So now I've got the basic structure of that tree in place. I'll carry on with some other of the painting. A few touches of light here and there. The base of the tree can be adjusted a little as well. Just trying to correct that branch. Really, all I'm doing is deciding whether I like the look of it. At this point, it's all about aesthetics, and you judge how you look at painting. Do you like what you see? Remember, you can break up shapes. So branches, if there's too many perfect looking branches, just drop some color on top of it. It could be leaves, it could be another branch overlapping. Just break up shapes that are monotonous or not really helping. Now, I can't put too many details in that mountain. It would just overwhelm the scene. There's quite a lot in the foreground, so I have to sacrifice some of the mountain details in a format like this. Just cleaning up the side of the building, creating a few sky holes as well. So that's pretty much done there. Simplifying, that's very important. If there's too much information, go back in and simplify. Final touches light. Let's get a few leaf shapes. If you look at the reference, of course, it's just thousands of leaf shapes. I can only try and suggest that. And frankly, I don't have the time to put in much more than that. So I'm going to cut in now and get a few of these branches a bit thinner, a little lost and found here and there. And that just adds a sense of atmosphere. It sort of attaches the tree into the background and sort of pulls it together, I'd say. Well, I'd say the tree looks a bit more interesting. I could spend ages on that, so I don't really have that time. I'm going to have to just call it a day with that. Getting some fresh lemon yellow. And now I'm going in for some strong highlights, more like sparks of light, just to add that fizz and pop. Just don't overdo it, that's the main thing. Alright, I think it's time to put in that figure I was talking about right in the beginning. So just someone in his garden, and just place it against this white part of the building. The head very, very small. That's just important to remember that. Keep the head small. Just a dot of burnt sienna there to add a bit of a warm skin tone. The hands of the figure. And try and get some light around the figure as well. That's about it. Just a bit more light on this wall now to just bring the wall forward a bit. And I think that will do. Alright, I think I've done what I can, so I'm going to sign it off and get the tape off as well, and we'll have a look at it. But overall, I quite enjoy it. I think it's got the main idea. Lots of light. And you can decide for yourself. Try something similar and just have fun with it. And there we go. Well, I think the little Westcape house has turned out okay. But true to every artist, I'm going to still put a few little dabs in here and there. I think a few little red color notes on some of these branches. We'll just add a little finishing touch. But I'm happy with the painting. Now it's your turn to have a go. So there it is, the painting done. I'm quite pleased with it. And just to give you an idea of the size, what would this be? Sort of a 6x8, or maybe an A5 if you're measuring it in that way. But I think it still says a lot. And you know, when you've done a painting like this and it works out and you've got a nice bold design to it, and there's good color and contrast, I think any size painting, if you can achieve that, you've done an excellent job. But of course, doing it on a smaller format like this is a lot more convenient and a lot more effective, because you can make that one brush stroke say what a big format would take 6, 7 or 8 brush strokes to do. And sometimes that just leads to the message getting lost a little and an overworked painting as a result. Anyway, there's a lot to take in there, and maybe you can watch it again and then try out your painting. It would be great if you got some inspiration out of this and put it into your own painting as well. Alright, it goes without saying, of course, if you haven't subscribed and hit the notification bell, you may miss the next video. So please don't do that. Rather subscribe right now if you haven't already. Alright, until next time, happy painting and cheers for now.